My name is Kate, and until recently, I thought my marriage to James was unbreakable. We had been together for almost a decade. We were high school sweethearts who weathered the storm of long-distance college life, early career struggles, and the trials of adulthood. James was my partner in everything, the love of my life, the man I had built my world around. But I guess I never imagined the extent to which his parents would go to unravel everything we had built. James's parents, my in-laws, had never fully approved of me. They had a very specific image of the type of woman they wanted their son to marry, someone from their affluent social circle, someone who shared their refined tastes and privileged background. To them, I was an outsider. My upbringing was modest. I grew up in a small town where my parents worked long hours to make ends meet and where simple joys were treasured. To his parents, I wasn't enough. I wasn't refined enough, educated at the right school, or familiar with the unspoken codes of their world. In the early years, I tried to win them over. I dressed the way they liked, learned the etiquette they expected, and put on a polite smile at every family gathering, even when my mother-in-law made snide comments about my quaint upbringing. I played the role of the dutiful wife, thinking that eventually they would come around, but they never did. The tension between us remained simmering just beneath the surface, and it only grew more pronounced when James's father, Richard, had a health scare. It was a mild heart attack, but it changed things. James started spending more time with his family, drawn into their worries and their insular world. I tried to be supportive, giving him the space he needed, but my absence only allowed his parents to exert more influence over him. It began with small changes, James canceling plans with me to have dinner with his parents, not telling me about family events until the last moment, and even starting to use phrases that sounded suspiciously like things his mother would say. He began to criticize the way I kept the house, my job as a school teacher, and even my friends. It was as if he had started to see me through his parents' judgmental eyes, and suddenly, I was not measuring up. One evening, James came home, his face somber, and asked to talk. We sat down in the living room, and as he spoke, my world shattered. He told me that he needed a break, that he wasn't sure if our marriage was what he wanted anymore. He said he felt like he was being held back, that he needed time to think about what he truly wanted in life. I knew those words weren't really his. They were his parents. They had finally convinced him that I wasn't right for him. I packed my bags that night, my hands shaking as I stuffed clothes into a suitcase. James watched from the doorway, his face blank, and he offered no comfort, no words to make me stay. I left the home we had built together and moved into a small apartment across town. The first night alone was the hardest. I lay awake in an unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had unraveled so quickly. The ache in my chest was unbearable, and I knew that my in-laws had won, but what they didn't realize was that I held the family's deepest secret, one that could shatter the perfect image they tried so hard to maintain. It all began 3 years ago when Richard, my father-in-law, had pulled me aside during a family gathering. He was visibly shaken, a side of him I had never seen before. He told me that he needed someone to talk to, someone who wasn't directly part of his social sphere. I had always been an outsider, and in that moment, he used it to his advantage. He confessed that their family wealth, the seemingly endless stream of money that funded their luxurious lifestyle, was in jeopardy. He had made several risky investments, and they had failed spectacularly. The family fortune was nothing but a mirage, propped up by loans, deceit, and appearances. Richard had begged me to keep his secret. He couldn't bear the thought of his wife, Veronica, or his son James knowing the truth. The shame would be unbearable, and the fallout devastating. Against my better judgment, I had agreed. I kept his secret even when it gnawed at me, even when I watched them continue their lives of luxury while I struggled to pay off my student loans. I did it for James because I loved him, and I knew how much his family's image meant to him. But now, as I sat alone in my apartment, my suitcase still open on the floor, I realized that the time for protecting their secret was over. They had taken everything from me, my marriage, my happiness, my sense of belonging, and now I was going to make sure they understood the cost of their cruelty. The next day, I started making phone calls. I reached out to old contacts, people I knew who worked in finance, people who understood how these things worked. I asked questions, learned about the public records I could access, and I started piecing together the true state of Richard's finances. It wasn't difficult. The cracks were already starting to show. The lavish family vacations, the country club memberships, the donations to charities, it was all a front, all funded by money they no longer had. I gathered everything, documents, screenshots, financial records, and I compiled it into a neat, indisputable package. I didn't want revenge for the sake of it. I wanted them to understand that they couldn't treat people the way they had treated me. They couldn't destroy my life without consequence. The first person I contacted was Veronica. I called her one afternoon, my heart pounding in my chest. She answered on the third ring, her voice cold as always. "What do you want, Kate?" she asked, her impatience palpable. "I think we need to talk," I replied, my voice steady. "I know about the family's financial situation, Veronica. I know everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was shaky. "What are you talking about?" I could almost picture her face, her perfect composure cracking for the first time. "I'm talking about Richard's bad investments, the loans, the debt. I'm talking about the fact that your entire lifestyle is built on lies. If you don't believe me, I can send you the documents I have." There was a sharp intake of breath. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I think I do," I said calmly, "and unless you want everyone else to know, I suggest you sit down with James and tell him the truth. About everything. You owe him that much." I hung up before she could respond, my hands trembling as I set the phone down. I knew that this was only the beginning. Veronica was a proud woman, but she was also terrified of scandal, of losing the image she had worked so hard to create. I had given her a choice: come clean to her son, or risk the entire family finding out the truth in a much more public way. A week passed before I heard anything. Then, one evening, I received a text from James. It was short, just a few words. "Can we talk? Please." We met at a small coffee shop, one we had gone to often when we were dating. He looked different, tired, worn down. He sat across from me, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with confusion and pain. "My parents told me everything," he said quietly. "Is it true?" I nodded. "It's true, James. I've known for years. Your father asked me to keep it a secret. He didn't want you to know." He stared at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" I took a deep breath. "Because I loved you. Because I thought I was protecting you. I didn't want you to see your parents differently, and I thought they would eventually come clean. But they didn't. And then they convinced you to leave me. I realized I couldn't keep protecting them, not at my own expense." James looked away, his jaw clenched. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I feel like everything I knew about my family was a lie." "It wasn't all a lie," I said gently. "But they made mistakes, and they hurt people in the process. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, James. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth." For a long time, James didn't respond. He just sat there, staring at his coffee, his thoughts miles away. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Kate, for everything, for not standing by you." Tears welled in my eyes and I blinked them away. "I know," I said, "but it's too late for us. Too much has happened." He nodded, his face crumpling with grief. "I know, I wish I could take it all back." We sat there for a while longer, the silence between us filled with all the things we couldn't say. Finally, we both stood, and James reached for my hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for telling me the truth." I squeezed his hand, then let it go. "Take care of yourself, James, and remember, the truth is the only thing that matters now." As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had lost my marriage, but I had reclaimed my voice, my power. My in-laws had tried to destroy me, but in the end, it was their own lies that had torn them apart. And as for me, I was ready to start over, to build a new life, one built on honesty, strength, and the knowledge that I had done what was right, no matter how painful it had been.